Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Chief Executive Officer and founder at medical building Wholesalers, Vinnie Sankaran. These days, he is based in Dallas, Texas, and previously he spent some time in Overland Park, Kansas, in the Kansas City metro. He's originally from India, and he came to America at 14, and he's been climbing the business ladder ever since. He loves speaking to leaders and entrepreneurs, along with sharing stories. He has been to over 50 countries around the globe and has a wealth of knowledge, wisdom, and stories. Enjoy this interview.
How are you doing? You can call me Vinnie or Vinod. Either one works. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm wonderful. Hey, thanks for taking some time out today. I appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, I knew there was today. I was like, let me check. I don't know who's calling who, and I don't have an invite. So I looked at it and just saw your email. So glad to hear you. How are you doing today? I see that you're calling from Kansas.
Kansas City, Missouri, absolutely. Yeah, everything's good. It's getting a little cold here, but the sun's shining, so it's all good. Where are you coming out of?
I'm in Dallas now. I used to live in Overland Park a few years ago.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so how long were you in Overland Park?
About 2 years. This was
Okay.
a bunch of years ago. I used to work for Sprint many, many years ago.
I gotcha. Okay, yeah, over in the Village area?
Yep. Hey, they're world headquarters. So yeah, it was just pretty good. It was pretty good. I was there for almost a year. 2 years. Almost 2 years.
So how did you like it in the Kansas City area?
The city was great. I had a lot of friends. Just graduated from my master's program, and that was fine. Kansas, I didn't have a problem. But Sprint, I was not very happy with how Sprint was doing stuff. That was when they just bought Nextel. Things are not going very well. I saw the writing on the wall, and I kind of left.
I've heard that about Sprint. You know, when mergers and things like that started happening, there was a period where I knew a lot of people here too that just, yeah, it was. I mean, in the beginning it was good, but then when things started kind of moving upwards, so to speak, things just got weird. So,
pretty much.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
I just saw the writing, and I was like, yeah, it's time to leave, and I did. So that was a long, long time ago. This was actually 2004 and 5, so we're talking 15, 16 years ago. And then, then I was in New York for a bunch of times, almost 17 years, and I moved to Dallas last year.
What's that been like? I mean, obviously coming from Kansas City, I know it well enough, but going to New York, which is just such a big place, and then coming back to a place that probably is a little bit more comparable. Dallas is probably a bit more comparable to Kansas City.
Yes, Dallas is bigger than Kansas City, and based on what I do right now, it's I have clients across the country. I travel a lot, so a couple of reasons I moved. I was there for a long time. Didn't like the cold, especially my wife. That was one reason. COVID changed a lot of things. With remote work, we wanted to open an office. It just made more sense to open it in Texas as opposed to New York. So I lived in New York and New Jersey for many years. And also, it just needed a big enough airport, and Dallas has, a big enough airport with both Southwest and American headquarters here. So, picked up and I came and did some research early last year, looked at some places. So like, hey, this is doable. Let's give it a shot for a few years. And if not, we'll move back. And it's been great. It's been great.
To elaborate a little bit more on COVID, talk to me a little bit about how you survived that time period and how it's changed the way you live your life now that we're coming out of it.
Right. So a couple of things. Because we are in healthcare, so there were changes, but it also bounced back faster than other industries. Some bounced back even faster, but general economy, right? For example, tourism and travel took a much longer, same as retail. Being in healthcare, it changed, right? When we had the lockdown, a lot of other clients or our doctors, they were able to switch to telehealth if they were in mental health, just, regular office visits. So that was, so for like about 2.5, almost 3 months, let's call it March, April, May, and part of June, it's kind of almost stagnant, dead. It was bad. Some of our providers still struggle because if they were doing elective surgeries, let's say like colonoscopy or anything like that, that was pushed for almost a year. But the other ones bounced back pretty fast. So even in the healthcare world, based on the specialties, people where it bounce, and we do a lot of mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse kind of stuff billing. So we dropped about only like 7 to 10% as opposed to many of our clients, billing companies that dropped 50%, 60%. So we consider ourselves lucky. Also, at that time, we took all our travel budget because I couldn't go and meet any of our clients, do shows, events. We took all the travel budget and put it in an IT team. Two things we did. One is we did a lot of digital marketing, did content, case studies. So that was a whole separate team. Apart from that, we did robotic process automation, built some tools that will make us more efficient. That's kind of how we used half of 2020 and most of 2021.
So let's say you're in front of a group of grade school kids on career day, and one of them looks up at you, and let's just say they're fourth graders. And one of them says, "What do you do for a living, and how are you qualified to do that?" How would you answer them?
A fourth grader, huh? Yeah, I've never talked to a fourth grader. That'll be a little difficult. So what do I do for a living? Let's see. Make it easy for a fourth grader. So we actually help doctors collect money from insurance companies. That's the easiest way I could put it. And I don't know if a fourth grader will understand, and they'll understand doctors, but I don't know if they'll understand insurance companies. That's the first thing. And what makes us good is, that's mostly experience. And we look at different factors in the revenue cycle management, as the industry is called. A lot of things that can go wrong. Insurance companies are heavy hitters. These are all billion-dollar companies. They have a whole team just to delay and deny claims. And our goal is to fight with them and get the money as soon as possible. So there's a lot of knowledge that goes into it. So we have a team of 500 plus people in different aspects of revenue cycle just to address different things. It could be in the front end, verification of benefits, as we call it. You have insurance, we have to check and see your insurance is valid. If you have a procedure, we have to get permission, or as it's called, prior authorization. Then there's coding, correct coding, there's up coding, there's down coding. So a lot of things like that we have learned over the years. And if you look at our website, you'll see a lot of different case studies and white papers and thought leaderships that we've written. And I speak at a bunch of conferences about different topics in the revenue cycle management. So, that doesn't come overnight. It takes years and years, a couple of decades to, become an expert. Did that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah, it absolutely did. And, I'm curious, in my main line of what I do with podcasting is I interview musicians, jazz musicians,
I see that.
Yeah, and a lot of them come from Canada. I'm always so happy to hear how the government will give them grants to make albums. They're very high on funding the arts, but they also have socialized medicine. And I'm curious in your line of work, and I always tell them how wonderful it is, but they're like, wait, nothing's perfect. There's a long waiting list. They kind of talk to me a little bit about what they have to go through. But I'm curious, in your line of work, if we did get to a point where there was a government-funded, healthcare mandate and people didn't have to worry about going bankrupt and all of those other things, how would that change what you do? Would you continue to do what you do already, or how would that get in the way?
It would change. So yeah, two questions. So let me just talk like 30 seconds about Canada and Australia. So Canada and UK has government medicine. It works for the majority of people, but there are also issues, because of the long waiting list. And, sometimes people die waiting in line. That's the sad part. You kind of have, I won't call it ration the care, but, there's only this much people can get in through the line. So that's a problem. So Australia, which is a little smaller than Canada in terms of population, they have something similar, but they also let you buy an add-on piece called the private piece. So everybody has government health care, but people with with money can buy that extra piece. So let's say you waited 3 months, but you have the private piece, you can kind of cut in line and pay a little, and you have privatized medicine. So they have a kind of a hybrid model. And it kind of works for them, but they still have problems too. So the problem with, two problems with the U.S. The U.S. population is more than 10 times that of Canada. So to do the same thing in the U.S. is very, very difficult because of the size we have. That's one problem. So I don't know if it's ever going to happen similar to Canada. I don't think it's even possible. The other thing is, let's say it happens, Medicare actually works pretty decently. Medicaid, on the other hand, works, but the doctors are not happy. It really, really pays very minimal. It's almost considered as charity by both hospitals and doctors. Now, it works. Now, the issue is, even if that happened and we only had Medicare and Medicaid, we would still have billing. It would change because right now our billing is Medicare, Medicaid. Anything in government maybe veterans or TRICARE, but also all the commercial players like United, blah, 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 those will go away and everything will move to Medicare. So we'll still have, something to do. It'll just be a little different. That's about it.
Yeah. So let's go back in your life. You sound like a very highly motivated person. You got kickboxing. You teach that. There's a lot of things that are a part of your life. Talk to me about where you were born and raised and what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Wow. No, yeah, kids have dreams. I didn't actually have anything particular, like people think I should be a policeman or a pilot. No. So I was born in India. This was in 1979. So half my life I've lived in India, did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I came to the U.S. I went to Oklahoma State. This was right before 9/11. So people ask, why Oklahoma State? I'm like, hey, that's because they paid for me, and that's what happened. I got a full scholarship. So came to Oklahoma State, did dual masters in industrial engineering and finance, and then I worked for Sprint because the economy was kind of shaky right after 9/11. They offered me a good job, so I was there for about a little less than 2 years. Then my wife was my girlfriend, then was in New York. It just made more sense to move to New York, so I went there, and I got a bunch of job offers, Amex, a couple of insurance companies. Then I met a gentleman in Brooklyn who was an entrepreneur, and I was like, I've tried these big companies. I think I should try the entrepreneur route, and we tried that. So we did a few different things before we launched R3M. Trained nurses in India, placed them all over the world, did some stuff in medical tourism or medical travel, as they call it. If somebody needs a knee replacement, fly them to India, get it done. Way cheaper. They get a vacation, they get their procedure and come back. Sometimes insurance pays for it, sometimes the company pays, sometimes it's their savings. That we did for a couple of years, and then revenue cycle management happened. And we really built this company from like 3 employees. We have over 500 employees right now. We do billing coding for a bunch of different things. So what I actually wanted to do, everybody in India does either become a doctor or an engineer. And that's kind of the route I took. But as I grew older, I'm like, I don't want to sit behind a desk. I'm good with people. I like to talk to people. And I just took up sales. And being a small company, you kind of end up doing a lot of things. You manage the finances. You are this face of the company, so you kind of end up doing sales. Once I started doing it, it just clicked, and I'm like, I'm good with clients. They like me, and that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 11 plus years now.
So, now you're in Dallas. I'm curious, would it make a difference if you had this business, say, out of Kansas City or New York or even Southern California? Does it make a difference with what you're doing where you're located?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have clients across the only thing I would say is, I do a lot of conferences. I speak. Actually, I'm speaking at a conference on mental health later this week, but that's a virtual one, so that's easy. But many times I go travel. Dallas, one of the reasons I also picked is right in the middle of the country. Anywhere I want to travel, it's less than 3 hours. That's been great. Even I was in New York when I used to go to California, 6-hour flight. I was like, And I also go to India a couple of times because we have an office in India too. Bunch of our people, we have a back office where we call it delivery locations there. So technically, I could be anywhere in the world, but I would prefer being in the U.S. time zone because most of my clients say it will be easier. So if I was in Europe, I could still do it, but what happens is, let's say I want to meet a doctor in Vegas. I can't tell him I'll meet you after 2 months. I can tell him I'll meet him next week. That's perfectly fine and acceptable, but that's the reason being the U.S. is good. It could technically be Canada too or Mexico. Anywhere close by, like I can meet somebody in 3-4 days. It works.
I always think about that with Kansas City because we're technically in the center of the country. It's always really
That
good.
Is correct. That is absolutely true. But the airport in Dallas is bigger. So what happens is smaller, right? Even Austin, right, is really growing and stuff, but the airport is really bad. That's one of the reasons I had to reject Austin. Houston was another big United hub, which is great, but the hurricanes and stuff, and it's more oil-based, so that's one of the reasons I rejected it. I also looked at Nashville before I moved here. Nashville is good enough, but not as big an airport. So one of the reasons, if not here, I would have gone to Kansas because I know the place pretty well, but, Dallas actually has a big healthcare system. So a couple of reasons why I picked Dallas.
So you've been to over 50 countries, and I would imagine in your line of work, being involved in healthcare, you've seen a lot of different cultures. and a lot of different ways that healthcare works around the world. How has that knowledge of being around the world in so many countries helped you relate and be relatable to a client?
That's a good question. I'm thinking. I have seen a bunch of countries, and healthcare is different in every part that I've seen. But when it comes to U.S. healthcare, it's very unique. Me using any of the other experience is not really going to help with U.S. It'll just confuse our employees. See, a couple of things, right? Our clients are doctors. Most of them are really smart, but in their line of work, most of them are not even good businessmen. So if I start giving them ideas and stuff, it totally throws them out. That's in terms of my clients. But when we actually go to a conferences and talk, most of the people at the conference are my peers. So they do something similar in the industry. So let's say I'm doing revenue cycle, but there'll be somebody else who's helping a doctor set up their practice. And there's another company that helps them staff. There's another one that helps them with their taxes or retirement planning. So we have people who are from the government, they're like let's call them, they're the liaison with the government. I wouldn't call them lobbyists, but they actually work on their behalf to see how, many times you get cuts from the government, so you need somebody talking to the congressman and senator saying, hey, this is what's going on. The doctors are struggling because of reimbursements and so on like that. So when we talk as an industry, then we talk about a lot of different options. Hey, maybe this will work better. That's how, we had fee for service. You have value-based care. A lot of different things have been discussed, and then it happens 10 years later because the government really works pretty slowly. So ideas that are discussed today is not going to hit for another 5-7 years. That's usually how it happens. So the other cultures are great because we know what works, what doesn't work. But again, each country is unique. What works in one country may not work in another one. So that usually never comes up. I talk to a lot of people and, we connect, ice break and say, hey, wow, I've been to this country. And they say, yeah, I've had a great time. That's a great way to break ice and get to know either a doctor or somebody, but it really doesn't help when it comes to business per se.
Gotcha. So how did this love of kickboxing come about? Are you an instructor as well?
Not in Dallas. I haven't started yet. Actually, I found, so when I came to Dallas, I went around a bunch of different places. Some of them are sparring. So I actually found another called Title Boxing. They do a lot more boxing, but they'll let me kick, so that's great. I haven't started teaching here yet. See, my only issue is, even when I was in New Jersey, I didn't teach as much because of my schedule. Because even though I've been working from home since 2015, when I say either I'm in front of the computer or talking to somebody like I'm with you, or I'm meeting clients face-to-face. So many times my schedule is very erratic. So I can't give them, say, hey, I'll teach every Tuesday. I can't say that. So I'm usually the substitute teacher because of my availability. So they'll text me like 2 days or a day before, say, are you available to teach? I'm like, great. Then I show up. So I don't put my name on the schedule. Here I haven't started in Dallas, but in New Jersey I used to. But I've just got to know them. I've been here, less than a year. So I think maybe in a couple of months I could become a sub-teacher here too. Because they see me kick the bags and I've broken 3 bags, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. So, who's been a role model for you? Who's been someone that you've looked up to and given you good advice in your life?
Oh, wow. There's been a lot of people. So let me go back, right? So from college, I had a couple of professors who actually showed me. So I was an engineering guy all my time. There's a professor called David Carter in Oklahoma State. He was the first guy who taught me about finance. And, as an engineering guy, they don't usually expose you much to finance. So I got a lot of interest in finance, how investments work. So he was one of the guys. And then over the years, there have been a bunch of people. So I didn't know anything about revenue cycle in 2010. So I went to conferences. There's an organization called HBMA, Healthcare Business Management Association. So I met a bunch of people there, and they have been, really, really like my mentors, and they've helped. So there's actually a company that was my competition called Gibbs, and I met him many, many years ago. And not only did he invite me to dinner and introduce me to a bunch of people, he didn't have to, because technically I was competition was way bigger than us, but still, so there were always people like that. There's another guy called Bob Burley. I'm still in touch with him. He's been in the industry for 40 plus years. He's a 70-year-old man, and he's been to our offices in India. He's given us a lot of advice. So there've been a bunch of people over the years. Each one has helped me with different things. But and there have been my kickboxing instructors who, you are healthy, you can focus. I'm a big believer of that. And I've been a morning person, usually get up at 5 a.m. and like speak to India team, then go to the gym, come back, and then, start working. I usually like to start early, but it doesn't work out every day. So I can give you a few names. If you wanted in writing, I could, but there have been so many of them over the years.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I'm always curious about the Indian culture. It always seems like whenever I look at the population from India that comes to America, there's a real business acumen. There's a real hustle that's different about the American mindset. What is that? What is it that's different about the way education and the culture works that really gets folks like you that are very highly driven and succeed in America exceedingly well?
That is a good question. It's been asked me before. I mean, many people have asked. See, the thing is this. When you look at the population of India or China, right, it's literally survival of the fittest. And you have 1.4 billion people. So when you're 3 years old or 4 years old, that's when you start. And they're already talking about you got to make it to this college and this college. And there's always a 1-1-1. Most people make it. Some don't. And you don't see them because they don't make it here. Right? If you go to India, you'll see not everybody can make the race. But the ones you see who make it to the UK, the US, are the ones who actually win that race, right? It's not easy to come here. There's visa issues, there's money issues, and don't forget you could come here. There's culture issues. Some people get homesick, a lot of different things. But the ones you see who work have gone through this. So we have this survival stuff, and this competition is really, really high, really sincere. And education is like number one. We are very, very sure that the way to break the cycle and, go from whatever your parents were. My parents were educated, but there are so many I know who weren't. And, to break the cycle and go to the next level or 5 levels above, you need education. And that's imparted in you from really, really young age, 3, 4, maybe even before that. And, that's how it works. And when I was like even 7, 8, they were like, you got to do masters in the U.S. It was already there in our mind. And you just go. That's how, footballers do, like Lionel Messi. He's been playing football since he was 3 or 5. And, that's kind of how it works. And that's very tough. That's 1 in a billion. This is, 1 million out of 1 billion can make it.
Yeah,
and the ones you're seeing are the ones who made it. That's pretty much.
Did
that answer the question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it totally did. And it's interesting. Around the time that you were talking about being in Kansas City, it kind of got my brain going. I ran computer labs for the YMCA years ago, and I was in a position where I had to hire some employees, and I had a gentleman that had been here new from India within a year, and he graduated from Mahatma Gandhi University. I mean, he had so many qualifications that he dwarfed me, and I was going to offer him like $8.50 an hour, and I looked at him and I said, I would love to hire you. I said, but I would insult you by what I would offer you, and it was going to be part-time, and he just kept saying, no, it's going to be okay. I just want to get some experience here. And I don't know what happened. I think he finally decided not to do it. But I've always been endeared by him. And I did actually talk to him about 6 months after that. And he ended up, something came up. He had a family here, and he went to Chicago. And he said he was pumping gas and making twice that, making like $16, $17 an hour. But I just felt weird that he was so esteemed. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to offer you what you're worth. But he was explaining to me kind of the same thing. There is a level of go for it that's different. There's a level of education, that's woven into your DNA, and that's just the way he was.
Right. And, I know people like that, when I came here first, me and my wife, we worked, even though we had scholarship for the tuition, we still had to make rent and, so we worked at weird places. I mean, we've cleaned bathrooms, we've mopped floors, we've done, catering, cashier, you name it. We've done it the last, when we were in Oklahoma State. So, minimum wage, we've done that, and that gives you, so you do what is needed. That's pretty much it. And hey, this is a temporary, I'm doing my master's, it's going to get better. And it did over the years, So
Absolutely.
there's going to be a struggle, and that will be the story of anybody you ask. If you start with Jeff Bezos or anybody, they have a story like that. Because people only read the story of, oh, this guy's worth $200 billion. They don't look at what happened and 20 times how he failed.
Yeah, true. Very true. So I'm curious, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Alive, huh? If you told me that, I would love to meet Steve Jobs, but let's say alive. Let me give you, let's see. Because as I mentioned Jeff Bezos, we can have him as a name. But, because this is a fantasy question, I would like to meet one of the rock stars that I love. I've always been a fan of classic rock, so, anybody, Led Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, you name it, I would love to meet them in person, shake their hands, and just talk about their journey. Why not? It doesn't have to always be about work.
Right, exactly. So let me ask you this. Let's say you have a dream tonight and you run into your younger version around the time you were coming to America, and you could give that young person a piece of advice based on what you've learned and the wisdom that you've gained over the years. What would you tell your younger version?
Pick an industry and, start early, make some connections. So even in this company, right, we made some mistakes. We've learned, if you can look behind, I could have saved a bunch of years and we could have doubled, tripled the company. It doesn't have to be this company, anything. When you run a company, you learn a lot of things that work and a lot of things that work. Reading books helps a lot, but, many times you have to, go through it to understand and implement, Reading only gives you so much knowledge. Experience is experience. So a lot of things, so for example, this company, had I known what I know today, go back 10, 12 years, I could have done 20 times as bigger than this.
The other part of all of us is that there's a part of us that loves art that makes us grow, whether it's a good book or it's an album. You mentioned classic rock. That was the one thing that kind of kept us going during the pandemic. We had TV, we had film, we had art to distract us or to make us feel like we were still connected. What's that for you? Whether it's an album or a book, what is there in regards to literature or art or music that always makes you feel good that you come back to?
It's usually music or it's exercise. Me going to the gym, sometimes you don't want to go, but once you start, you always come out better. Almost always. I've never had me coming outside the gym and feeling worse than I went in. Never. When I go in, I'm like, oh, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, blah, blah. In the morning, evening, I'm like, I just had a tough day. The going is tough. Once you push yourself and you start the class, 5 minutes into it, you always feel great. That's one. And, music goes with exercising, right? So I put on the classic rock and a lot of albums, Any of the ones I mentioned, a lot of stuff. Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, usually the ones I listen to, and they make me feel better too. But the combination of these two has been awesome.
So in your years of working, especially now running your own operation, what's been the best client letter, fan letter, best response from somebody that was really happy with the work you did?
I'm just thinking, there's been a couple. There have been letters saying, hey, let me give you 2 examples. So, there have been doctors who really told me how we turned their practice around. And there have been a couple of those. But we also do, the back office work for many billing companies. And a few of them are so happy they've tried to buy us, recruit us over the years. So that's usually flattering, and this has happened a lot more in the last 2 years. You could do better, you should get this job. So they've been trying, and actually early next year we will be, wrapping this up and actually trying to sell the company or merge with a bigger company. So we're in the process of that right now. Let's see how that goes.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was curious, now that the world's opening up with COVID slowing down, I'm wondering if we talk in 5 years from now, are you gonna try to go a little bit harder than you have the last couple of years and do more? What's your outlook looking like?
Outlook is pretty positive, especially in healthcare. That's in healthcare, but 5 years is a long time. I don't know if I'll be with this company, if he will sell it and go with somebody else. So, the outlook is pretty good. The outlook is good. There is going to be a recession in the U.S. for, let's say, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, but I think after that it'll start getting better. A lot of things are dependent on a few things that are happening around the world. Ukraine, China, the zero COVID. Some things are out of our control, but overall, I think especially in healthcare and in technology, I think U.S. has a great future. Some industries, not so much. Manufacturing is making a comeback. That's great. But, like retail and hotels and tourism, I'm not really sure how much time that'll take. Especially retail, I'm not sure if they can bounce back at all. Everything online, but it depends on the industry. But the industries I'm looking at, mostly technology and healthcare, will be positive for the next 5-7 years at least.
So my final question to you is this: everyone has a version or an idea of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, clients, but you ultimately live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I don't think too much. I think that's the best thing. I try to focus on the now. I mean, as a CEO, I have to look at the future, but I'm not looking 20 years in the future, 10 years. We're looking more like for 3 months or something. I like to live for the day. I want to get up happy and, have a great reason to get out of bed. That's pretty much it. I keep it simple and, be healthy. That's one thing I've learned. All the money in the world can get you a better health. So if I can do as much as I can to take care of that, everything else will flow. Then I could focus, then I could do what I need to do and, enjoy life. That's it. I don't give it too much thought. Philosophy is pretty simple. Do the right thing and the results will come.
I like it. So if anyone wants to learn more about you, your services, anything related to your world, where's the best place for them to go on the web?
2 things. One is my LinkedIn profile. The other one would be medicalbillingwholesalers.com. Mostly LinkedIn profile because it keeps updating, and if I'm involved with anything else, it'll be there. So my LinkedIn profile is usually the best. Vinod Sankaran, or perhaps people call me Vinnie. So thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, business, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.